He looked me in the eyes, before the judge, and swore he was telling the truth. In that moment, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet, because I knew, deep in my soul, that every word coming out of his mouth was a carefully constructed lie. But what he didn't know, what nobody in that cold, silent room knew, is that I had the recording, every scream, every threat, every poisonous word he once spat at me, thinking he would never be discovered. And now, before justice, he was going to hear it all again. Only this time, everyone would hear it together. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever been accused of lying when you were telling the most painful truth of your life, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I want more people to know they're not alone, that there is strength even when we think we've lost everything. Because this story isn't just mine. It could be yours too. I lived in Seoul, in a small one-room apartment near Hongdae Station, where the windows shook every time the subway passed beneath the earth. It was a constant, rhythmic sound, almost comforting. The sound of routine, of ordinary life, of that feeling that everything was under control. I got used to that noise, just as I got used to him. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with faded yellow walls and a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. My neighbors were mostly university students and young professionals like me, people who worked long hours and came home exhausted, carrying convenience store bags and dreams of something better. The hallway always smelled of kimchi and laundry detergent, a mix of scents that became strangely comforting over time. My place was tiny, barely 30 square meters, but it was mine. A narrow kitchen with a 2-burner stove, a bathroom so small you could touch both walls at once, and a main room that served as bedroom, living room, and office all at once. I had a small desk by the window where I worked on my translations, a futon that I folded every morning, and a bookshelf overflowing with novels in 3 different languages. It wasn't much, but before him, it felt like enough. I thought I loved a good man. A successful lawyer, graduated from Seoul National University, intelligent, charismatic, the kind of man who made anyone believe in security just by being next to him. He wore wood and leather cologne, something expensive, I later learned, from a boutique in Gangnam, and spoke with confidence that bordered on arrogance, though I mistook it for self-assurance at the time. He laughed easily, with his whole chest, the kind of laugh that made you want to laugh too, even if you didn't get the joke. He taught me to like red wine, though I'd always preferred soju and beer before. He said wine was more sophisticated, more cultured, and brought bottles to my apartment with French labels I couldn't pronounce. We'd sit on my floor cushions, and he'd swirl the wine in his glass, talking about tannins and oak aging, and I'd nod along, pretending to understand, just happy that someone like him wanted to spend time with someone like me. He taught me to believe in promises whispered in the dark, promises of a future together, of a bigger apartment, maybe even a house someday, of trips to Europe and lazy Sunday mornings. He taught me to smile even when everything seemed too difficult, because he said I was too serious, too intense, that I needed to lighten up. But love, sometimes, is just the most beautiful disguise for manipulation, and it took me a very long time to realize that. In the beginning, everything was light, everything. He would show up at my door with flowers, always lilies, never roses, because he said roses were cliché, and take me to walk along the Han River at sunset, when the city lights started to twinkle, and reflect on the water like fallen stars. He'd hold my hand and tell me about his day, about difficult clients and complex cases, and I felt honored that someone so important, so busy, wanted to share his world with me. He made me laugh until my stomach hurt, doing impressions of his colleagues and telling stories about law school that seemed designed to make him look clever and brave. He said I was different, that I was special, that he had never felt this way about anyone, and I believed him, because when you spend so much time feeling invisible, when someone finally really sees you, it's easy to confuse attention with love. I had always been the quiet one. Growing up in Busan, I was the girl who preferred books to parties, who spent lunch breaks in the library instead of gossiping with classmates. My parents worked in a fish market, waking up at 3 in the morning and coming home smelling of brine and exhaustion. They wanted better for me, pushed me to study, to get into a good university, to move to Seoul and find a respectable job, and I did. I studied English literature, moved to Seoul right after graduation, found work at a small publishing house. I was proud of myself, but I was also lonely. Seoul was overwhelming. Too big, too fast, too indifferent. I made a few friends at work, but nothing deep, nothing that felt like home. So when he appeared, with his confident smile and his expensive cologne, and his promises of being seen, I fell fast and hard. But little by little, the flowers stopped appearing. The smiles became rare, and in their place came something different, something I didn't recognize immediately, but that was already there, growing like a shadow inside our relationship. It started with small comments. "That dress makes you look wider than you are. You're wearing makeup? Why? You're just going to work. Your laugh is too loud sometimes. People are staring." I'd feel a twist in my stomach each time, but I'd push it down, tell myself he was just being honest, just trying to help me improve. Then came the questions. Where was I? Who was I with? Why didn't I answer my phone immediately? He started calling me multiple times during work hours, and if I didn't pick up right away, he'd leave voicemails that started concerned and ended angry. I was worried something happened to you. Why don't you care about my feelings? Then came the isolation. He didn't like my friends from work. He said they were a bad influence, that they gossiped too much, that they didn't understand our relationship. He said my coworker Minji was jealous of what we had, that she was trying to turn me against him. So I started declining invitations to lunch, making excuses about being too busy, until eventually, the invitations stopped coming. He didn't like when I talked to my parents. He said they were too traditional, too controlling, that I needed to establish boundaries. So I called home less frequently, kept conversations short and superficial, ignored my mother's questions about when she'd meet him. The first time he raised his voice at me, the sound echoed louder than the train outside. I was washing dishes after we'd had dinner. I'd cooked his favorite galbi jim, spending hours braising the short ribs until they were tender, and he came home irritated, talking about something regarding work, about a client who questioned his judgment, who made him look incompetent in front of a senior partner. I tried to calm him down, drying my hands on a towel and approaching him carefully. "I'm sure it'll be fine. You're brilliant at what you do." But he turned to me with different eyes, hard, cold, like I'd never seen before, and shouted, "You don't understand anything. Stop talking. You think your little translating job compares to what I do? You have no idea about pressure, about stakes." I froze. The water was still running in the sink. My hands trembled, still damp. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. He stood there, breathing hard, his face red, his jaw clenched. Then he grabbed his jacket and left, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the broken glass, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. Then I cleaned up the mess, turned off the water, and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet, hugging my knees to my chest. I convinced myself it was just a bad day, that everyone has bad days, that I should have been more understanding, that I should have known better than to offer empty platitudes when he was genuinely stressed. I picked up the photo from the broken frame, a picture of us at Namsan Tower, both smiling, his arm around my shoulders, and carefully placed it in a drawer. When he came back 3 hours later, smelling of cigarettes and soju, he didn't apologize. He just went to bed, and I lay next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd done wrong. The second time came with a push. We'd been arguing for days, or rather, he'd been cold and distant for days, and I'd been desperately trying to figure out why. Then I saw the messages. His phone was on the bathroom counter while he showered, and it lit up with a notification. I wasn't the type to snoop. I never had been, but something made me look. It was from a woman named Soyeon. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." My blood ran cold. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped his phone. Last night he'd said he was working late, that he had to prepare for a big case. Last night I'd eaten dinner alone, saved a plate for him, fallen asleep on the couch waiting. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, water still dripping from his hair, I was standing there holding his phone. "Who is Soyeon?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. His face changed instantly. The relaxed post-shower ease evaporated, replaced by something sharp and defensive. "What are you doing with my phone? Who is she? Are you seriously invading my privacy right now? Are you that insecure? You told me you were working late." He walked toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. "I was working late. Soyeon is a colleague. We grabbed drinks after. Is that a problem? Am I not allowed to have a social life?" She said last night was amazing. Yeah, the work dinner was amazing. The client finally agreed to our terms. "You're twisting everything because you're paranoid." "I'm not." You are. You're just like everyone warned me. Clingy, jealous, crazy. The word crazy hit like a slap. Who had warned him? What had he been saying about me? When I tried to leave the bathroom, to get some space, to breathe, he blocked the doorway. We're not done talking. I need a minute. No, we're finishing this now. Please move. You don't get to make accusations and then run away. My heart was pounding. The small bathroom suddenly felt like a cage. You're scaring me. Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction? But then he shook his head, playing the victim. I'm scaring you? I'm the one being attacked in my own home, by someone I thought loved me. He moved aside, but as I tried to pass, he grabbed my arm. Not gently. His fingers dug into my skin, and he pushed me backward. I stumbled, catching myself on the sink. We stood there, frozen, both shocked by what had just happened. Then he released me and walked past, grabbing his phone from where I'd dropped it. You need to work on your trust issues, he said, his voice cold and measured again. This is getting embarrassing. I looked in the mirror after he left. There were red marks on my arm where his fingers had been. They faded within the hour, but the memory didn't. I convinced myself, again, that I'd pushed him to it. That if I hadn't looked at his phone, if I hadn't accused him, if I'd just been more trusting, more understanding, more enough, it wouldn't have happened. I apologized that night. I apologized for invading his privacy, for not trusting him, for being insecure. And he accepted my apology with a magnanimous nod, like a parent forgiving a child. I forgive you, he said, but you need to do better. I can't be in a relationship with someone who doesn't trust me. And I promised I would do better. I promised I'd work on myself. I promised I'd be the woman he deserved. The third time came with silence, that kind of silence that destroys more than any word. He spent days without talking to me, slept with his back turned, his body a wall I couldn't breach, ate alone, even when I cooked his favorite meals, left without warning, came home late, offered no explanations. I walked on eggshells trying to figure out what I'd done wrong this time. Had I said something? Worn something he didn't like? Failed to laugh at one of his jokes? The uncertainty was torture. I'd try to start conversations. How was your day? Silence. Should we watch something together? Silence. Did I do something to upset you? Finally, he'd look at me, his eyes full of disdain. You really don't know? That's even worse. But he wouldn't tell me. He'd just returned to his phone, to his laptop, to anywhere that wasn't with me. I apologized for things I hadn't done. I tried harder, cooked more, cleaned more, asked less, demanded nothing. And still, the silence continued. Until one day, he was suddenly fine again, smiling, affectionate, acting as if nothing had happened. The whiplash was disorienting. I was so relieved to have him back that I didn't question it. I just accepted it, grateful for the reprieve. This became the pattern. Explosion, silence, reconciliation, over and over. Each cycle getting shorter, the explosions more intense, the silences more punishing, the reconciliations less satisfying. I was always off balance, always anxious, always trying to predict which version of him I'd get, and I blamed myself. I thought if I could just figure out the right formula, the right way to be, he'd be good all the time. The kind man I'd fallen for would return permanently, but he never did, because that man never truly existed. Little did I know that that humiliation would be the beginning of my strength. One day, a Tuesday in March, gray and drizzling, the kind of day that feels like the sky is mourning, he disappeared. I came back from work around 6:30, tired from a long day of reviewing a particularly difficult translation, a dense philosophical text that had given me a headache. I unlocked the door, expecting to find him on the couch or at the small table, maybe working on his laptop. But the apartment felt different, empty in a way that had nothing to do with whether someone was home. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Then I noticed. His shoes were gone from the entrance. The expensive leather loafers he was so proud of, the sneakers he wore on weekends, the slippers he wore around the house, all gone. I walked further in, my bag sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor. His jacket wasn't on the hook. I opened the closet. Empty hangers swung like accusations. His suits, his shirts, his ties, all gone. The cologne on the bathroom counter, gone. His toothbrush, his razor, his contact lens solution, gone. The books he'd left on the nightstand, gone. Even the coffee mug he always used, the one with his university logo, gone. It was like he'd been erased from my life, or like I'd imagined him entirely. No, not entirely, because on the small dining table, under a half-empty glass of water, was a letter, handwritten, with that handwriting I once thought was beautiful, neat, precise, controlled. I sat down in the chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The words swam before my eyes at first, but then came into focus, sharp and cutting. I can't do this anymore. I've tried. I really have. But you're exhausting. Your constant need for reassurance, your insecurity, your inability to understand me or what I need. It's too much. I deserve someone who can match me intellectually and emotionally, someone who challenges me, not drags me down. You never understood me. You never really tried. You were too wrapped up in your own needs, your own feelings. Everything had to be about you. I gave you so many chances to change, to grow, to become the person I needed you to be. But you couldn't, or wouldn't. I'm done. Don't try to contact me. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my office. Move on. Find someone who can tolerate your issues. But leave me alone. You were never enough, and I don't think you ever will be. I read those words sitting on the cold floor of the kitchen. I'd slid off the chair at some point, my body collapsing under the weight of them, with the afternoon light coming through the window and illuminating the dust particles in the air, making them look like tiny stars in the universe of my destroyed life. I cried until I had no more tears, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and my head pounded, until I felt there was nothing left inside me but a vast, echoing emptiness. He'd left me, but worse, he'd left me believing it was my fault, that I was the problem, that I was unlovable, unfixable, fundamentally flawed. I called in sick to work for 3 days. I didn't eat. I barely drank water. I just lay on my futon, staring at the ceiling, playing every interaction over in my mind, trying to pinpoint where I'd failed him. My friend Minji, the one he'd said was jealous, called repeatedly. I didn't answer. On the 4th day, she showed up at my door, pounding until I had no choice but to let her in. She took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug. What happened? I told her everything, through broken sobs and hitching breaths. And when I finished, expecting her to agree that I'd messed up, that I'd been too much, she said something I didn't expect. He's the one who's sick, not you. I didn't believe her. Not then. How could I? I'd spent 2 years being told I was the problem. 2 years of having my reality questioned, my perceptions doubted, my feelings dismissed. But Minji stayed. She ordered food, made sure I ate. She helped me shower, change clothes, open the curtains. She reminded me that I'd survived before him, and I'd survive after him. Slowly, painfully, I started to function again. I went back to work. I smiled at people when they asked if I was okay, told them I was fine, just a bad breakup, nothing unusual. I pretended my world hadn't shattered. I didn't look for him, tried to move on, deleted his number, blocked him on social media, threw away anything he'd given me, tried to rebuild my life from the rubble he'd left behind. But at night, when the apartment was silent except for the rumble of the subway beneath the earth, I still heard his voice. You were never enough. I started to believe it, started to think maybe he was right. Maybe I was too much and not enough at the same time. Maybe I was unlovable. Maybe I'd always be alone. I stopped dating, stopped hoping, stopped believing that anyone would ever really love me. But fate, cruel and ironic as always, brought him back. Not as a lover, but as an enemy, inside a courtroom. 6 months later, 6 months of rebuilding, of therapy sessions where I slowly learned that what happened to me had a name, that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't crazy, I received a legal notification. It came to my office, delivered by a courier with an apologetic expression. A thick manila envelope with a law firm's name embossed on the front. My coworkers noticed, exchanged glances, but said nothing. I waited until lunch to open it, sat in the break room with trembling hands, pulled out the stack of papers. Legal jargon swam before my eyes, but certain phrases jumped out. Defamation of character. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Seeks damages in the amount of 50 million won. Defendant knowingly and maliciously. He was suing me. My ex, the man who destroyed me and walked away like it was nothing, was now demanding I pay him for the privilege of being destroyed. The complaint alleged that I'd been spreading false and defamatory statements about him to mutual acquaintances and professional contacts, that I'd claimed he was emotionally manipulative, that I'd accused him of verbal and physical aggression, that I'd told people he was cheating on me, and that these lies had damaged his reputation, his professional standing, his mental health. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. The break room walls closed in around me. All I'd done was tell the truth to exactly 3 people: Minji, my therapist, and one other friend, Jihyo, who'd asked why we broke up. I'd told them what happened, what he did, what he said, how he made me feel. I'd told them in private conversations, seeking support, trying to heal, and somehow he'd found out, and now he was punishing me for it. But more than that, he was rewriting history. In his complaint, he painted himself as the victim, as the patient, loving boyfriend who'd tried so hard to help his troubled girlfriend, who'd finally had to leave for his own mental health, who'd been repaid with vicious lies. He made me the villain in our story, and he was using the law he knew so well that he manipulated for a living, to make sure everyone else saw me that way too. I walked out of work that day, in a daze, rode the subway without seeing the other passengers, without hearing the announcements, got off at my stop, walked to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and then I screamed until my throat was raw, until I had no voice left, screamed out all the rage and pain and disbelief. Then I called the only lawyer I knew, a woman named Ji-eun who'd helped a friend with a contract dispute. She agreed to meet me that evening at a coffee shop near my place. Ji-eun was in her 40s, with tired eyes that had seen too much but still held kindness. She listened as I explained everything, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is a SLAPP suit," she finally said. "A what?" "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. He's suing you not because he thinks he can win, but to punish you for speaking out, to silence you, to drain your resources, financial and emotional. It's a tactic abusers use." The word abuser made me flinch. I'd been in therapy for months, but I still struggled with that label. He never hit me. Not really. Just that one push. Everything else was just words, just coldness, just, "He abused you," Ji-eun said gently, reading my face. "And now he's using the legal system to continue that abuse." We talked strategy. She explained that truth was a defense against defamation. If what I said was true, he couldn't win. But proving truth in court was complicated. It would be his word against mine. And he was a lawyer, polished and credible. I was just someone who'd been hurt. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked. "Text messages? Emails? Anything documenting his behavior?" I shook my head. He'd always been careful. The worst things were said in person, in private, where there were no witnesses. And I'd deleted our text conversations after the breakup, trying to move on. "Then this will be difficult," Ji-eun said honestly, "but we'll fight it. I believe you." Those 3 words, "I believe you," made tears stream down my face, because so many people hadn't. So many people had taken his side, accepted his version of events, dismissed my pain. The case moved forward quickly. He had money, an expensive legal team, connections throughout Seoul's legal community. I had Ji-eun, who was brilliant but overworked, and my own dwindling savings. His lawyers filed motion after motion, each one designed to intimidate, to wear me down. They demanded my therapy records, my medical history, my financial documents. They wanted to depose everyone I knew, to dig through my entire life looking for ammunition. Ji-eun fought back as best she could, but it was exhausting. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, heart pounding, mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if I lost? What if I couldn't pay? What if everyone believed him? Work suffered. I made mistakes in translations, missed deadlines. My boss called me in, concerned. I explained what was happening, vaguely, reluctantly, and she was sympathetic, but firm. I needed to focus. The company couldn't carry someone who wasn't performing. I felt like I was drowning, pulled under by wave after wave, unable to catch my breath. And through it all, he looked fine. I'd see him sometimes. Seoul is huge, but small in certain circles. And he'd be laughing with colleagues, confidently striding into court for other cases, living his life like he hadn't torn mine apart. The worst part was the whispers. His version of events had spread through mutual acquaintances. I'd run into people we both knew, and they'd look at me with pity or suspicion. Poor guy, having to deal with a crazy ex. Can you believe she's making things up about him? She must be really bitter about the breakup. I wanted to scream at them. Ask me what really happened. Look at the evidence. see the truth. But there was no evidence, just my word. And his word was louder, more credible, more believable. Ji-eun warned me repeatedly. He's going to try to make you look unstable. He's going to say you're vindictive, that you can't accept the breakup, that you invented everything. You need to be prepared. I didn't think I could be prepared. How does someone prepare to have their reality publicly dissected and denied? How does someone prepare to face the person who destroyed them and watch them lie? But I didn't have a choice. The trial date was set. That night, everything would change. The day of the trial arrived on a cold, gray autumn morning. October had brought shorter days and longer nights, and the city felt wrapped in melancholy. The sky was covered with low clouds that threatened rain but never delivered, just hung there like a weight pressing down on everything. I put on my most professional outfit, a black suit I'd bought specifically for this, stiff and uncomfortable but respectable. Ji-eun had advised me on everything: how to dress, how to sit, how to speak, how to react. You need to appear calm, credible, sympathetic, but not emotional. Juries. Well, we don't have a jury, but the judge, they respond to composure. But composure was the last thing I felt. My hands shook as I buttoned the jacket. My stomach churned, rejecting the tea I'd forced down. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the pale, scared woman staring back. The courthouse was imposing, all concrete and glass, modern and cold. I'd never been inside one before. It smelled of floor polish and old paper and anxiety. The security line was long, and I stood there feeling like I might faint, surrounded by lawyers and litigants and witnesses, all with their own dramas playing out. Ji-eun met me inside. She squeezed my hand. Breathe. We've got this. But when we entered the courtroom and I saw him sitting there, confident, composed, wearing an expensive suit and that calm professional mask, my breath caught. He didn't look at me. Not when I entered, not when I sat down, not even a glance. Like I wasn't worth his attention. Like I was nothing. His legal team, 3 lawyers, all polished and prepared, shuffled papers, conferred in whispers, exuded competence. Ji-eun was alone on our side, one overworked public interest lawyer against a corporate machine. The judge entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an expression that revealed nothing. She settled into her seat, adjusted her glasses, and began. The opening statement started. His lead lawyer, a man named Park, silver-haired and silver-tongued, stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, this is a simple case. My client, a respected attorney with an impeccable reputation, ended a relationship that had become unhealthy for both parties. He did so respectfully, compassionately, and in return, the defendant launched a campaign of defamation designed to destroy his career and his life. My fingernails dug into my palms. She told friends, colleagues, anyone who would listen, that my client was abusive, that he was manipulative, that he was unfaithful. All lies. All designed to exact revenge for a breakup she couldn't accept. And these lies have had real consequences. My client has lost professional opportunities, suffered reputational harm, experienced significant emotional distress. He's here seeking not revenge, but justice and accountability. Park sat down, satisfied. Ji-eun rose. Your Honor, the truth is a defense against defamation. Everything my client told people about her relationship was true. She was in an emotionally manipulative and psychologically violent relationship. When she escaped that relationship and sought support from friends, she was exercising her right to speak about her own experiences. She never launched a campaign. She confided in a handful of people. And now the plaintiff is using this lawsuit to silence her, to punish her for speaking, to continue the control he exercised during their relationship. The judge made notes, her face unreadable. Then began the testimony. Park called his first witness, one of his colleagues who testified that his reputation at the firm had suffered, that people were talking, that he'd seemed upset. Under Ji-eun's cross-examination, the witness admitted he'd never actually heard anyone say anything negative, just that there were rumors. Then Park called a friend of his who testified that he'd been devastated by the breakup, that he'd confided how difficult the relationship had been, how he'd tried so hard, but she was so difficult. Ji-eun couldn't shake this testimony much. It was just one friend defending another. Then came the character witnesses, people I barely knew, testifying that I'd seemed unstable, or emotional, or overly sensitive during the relationship. Each one felt like a knife, and through it all, he sat there, looking sad and wounded, the perfect victim, Then Park called him to the stand. He walked to the witness stand with confidence, his posture perfect, his expression serious but not angry. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. His voice was steady, clear, without a trace of nervousness. Park walked him through a carefully constructed narrative. They'd met, fallen in love. Things were good at first, but she'd become increasingly demanding. Jealous, suspicious. She'd go through his phone, accuse him of cheating, start fights over nothing. He'd tried to help her, suggested counseling, been patient, but it wasn't enough. I loved her, he said, his voice catching just slightly, performatively. I really did, but I couldn't sacrifice my own mental health anymore, so I ended it, kindly. I even wrote her a letter explaining my feelings. Yes, the letter, the one that destroyed me, now reframed as an act of kindness. And what happened after you ended the relationship? Park asked. She started telling people I'd abused her, that I'd been violent, that I'd cheated. None of it was true. I never raised my voice to her. I never laid a hand on her. I was faithful throughout our relationship, but she was angry that I'd left, and she wanted to hurt me. Did you ever threaten her? Never. I'm a lawyer, Your Honor. I understand the seriousness of threats, of manipulation. I would never do such things. Did you ever make her feel unsafe? Absolutely not. I cared deeply for her well-being, even when she was treating me poorly. He was so convincing, so calm, so reasonable. If I hadn't lived through it, I might have believed him too. Ji-eun's cross-examination was sharp. She challenged inconsistencies, pressed him on details, but he was prepared, his answers rehearsed. He had an explanation for everything. Isn't it true that you isolated her from her friends? No, she chose to spend less time with them. I never prevented her from seeing anyone. Isn't it true that you criticized her appearance, her work, her personality? I occasionally offered constructive feedback, yes. In a relationship, partners help each other grow. Isn't it true that you pushed her? Absolutely not. I never touched her in anger. He looked directly at the judge as he said this, his eyes sincere, his voice firm. I felt sick. He was so good at this, at lying, at manipulation. Of course he was. He'd been doing it to me for 2 years. When he finished testifying, Park rested their case. Ji-eun called me to the stand. I stood on shaking legs, walked to the front of the courtroom, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. My voice came out thin and uncertain. Ji-eun walked me through my testimony gently. I described the relationship, the escalating control, the verbal attacks, the push, the emotional torture. I tried to be clear, specific, credible. But when Park cross-examined me, he tore into every word. You claim my client was abusive, but you stayed with him for 2 years. Why? Because that's what happens in these situations. You don't realize, so you freely chose to stay. Nobody forced you. He made me believe. Yes or no? Did he physically restrain you from leaving? No, but did he threaten you with violence if you left? He threatened to ruin my life. Answer the question. Did he threaten violence? Not physical violence, but... So no. You have no evidence of any physical abuse because there was none. You have no witnesses to any of these alleged verbal attacks because they didn't happen. You have no documentation of any threatening behavior. What you have is bitterness over a failed relationship and a willingness to lie to punish a man who wouldn't stay with you. That's not... Do you have any evidence at all to support your claims? And there it was. The question I'd been dreading, because the answer was no. I had no evidence, just my memories, my pain, my truth. And in a courtroom, that wasn't enough. I have my word, I said quietly. Your word, Park repeated, his tone dripping with disdain, against the word of a respected attorney with no history of violence, no criminal record, no complaints from any other partner. Your word. I looked at Ji-eun, desperate. She looked back at me with sympathy but couldn't help. We both knew how this looked. Park sat down, confident he'd destroyed my credibility. The judge called for a recess. I stumbled out of the courtroom, found a bathroom, and threw up. Ji-eun found me there, rubbing my back. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. I don't have proof. I don't have anything. It's okay, she said, though her eyes said otherwise. We'll figure something out. But what? What could we possibly do? We returned to the courtroom. The judge asked if there was any additional evidence either side wished to present. Park stood. No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests. The judge looked at Ji-eun. Defense? And in that moment, Sitting there in that cold courtroom with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and my entire future hanging in the balance, I remembered. The recording. I'd almost forgotten about it. After the breakup, after the letter, after those dark days where I'd barely functioned, I'd put the old phone in a drawer and never looked at it again. It hurt too much. I wanted to forget everything about that time, but it was still there, still had battery, and on it was the recording I'd made that last terrible night. 3 weeks before he left, he'd come home drunk and furious. I never found out why. He'd started screaming the moment he walked in, about how I was suffocating him, how I was holding him back, how pathetic I was. I'd been terrified, genuinely scared of what he might do, so I'd grabbed my old phone from the drawer, the one I'd kept meaning to recycle, turned on the voice recorder, and hidden it under the couch cushion. I'd recorded 23 minutes, his screaming, my crying and pleading, and then, at the end, his voice dropping to that terrifying calm as he leaned in close and said, "If you ever tell anyone about this, I will destroy you. I'm a lawyer. I know exactly how to do it. Nobody will believe you. Nobody. You'll be the crazy ex, and I'll be the victim. Do you understand me?" And I'd whispered, "Yes." "Say it louder." "Yes, I understand." "Good. Now clean yourself up. You look pathetic." I'd completely blocked out that I'd recorded it. Trauma has a way of helping you forget the things that hurt most. But now, sitting in that courtroom, watching him lie so confidently, it came flooding back. "Your Honor," I said, my voice louder than I expected, "I'd like to present new evidence." Everyone turned to look at me. Ji-Eun's eyes widened. Park frowned. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Approach the bench," the judge said. Ji-Eun and I walked forward. Park joined us, his confident demeanor slipping slightly. "What evidence?" the judge asked. I have a recording, Your Honor, from our relationship. I'd forgotten about it until just now." "This is highly irregular," Park protested. "Evidence should have been disclosed during discovery. This is a clear violation." "I honestly forgot I had it," I said, looking directly at the judge. It was too painful to think about. But he just testified that he never threatened me, never made me feel unsafe, and I have proof that he did. The judge considered this for a long moment. "Where is this recording?" "At my apartment. I can retrieve it." Park was livid. "Your Honor, this is clearly a fabrication, a desperate attempt, or," Ji-Eun interjected, "it's evidence that proves my client has been telling the truth all along." The judge thought, then nodded. "We'll adjourn for the day. Court will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring the recording and we'll determine its admissibility then. This court is adjourned." The gavel struck. I'd bought myself one more day, one more chance. I took a taxi to my apartment, ran upstairs, tore through my drawers until I found the old phone. My hands shook as I pressed the power button, praying it would turn on. The screen flickered, showed a low battery warning, but lit up. I found the voice memo app, saw the recording from that date, 23 minutes and 17 seconds. Pressed play. His voice filled my tiny apartment, and I felt 2 years younger, trapped, terrified, but also vindicated, because it was all there. Everything he'd denied, every threat, every cruel word. I charged the phone, backed up the recording to my computer, to a cloud service, to 3 different USB drives. I wasn't taking any chances. That night I couldn't sleep. I played the recording over and over, making sure it was clear, that his voice was recognizable, that nothing was ambiguous. Minji came over at midnight, finding me still awake, still listening. "Is this it?" she asked. "Is this what you needed?" "I don't know," I admitted. "He's a lawyer. He'll find some way to discredit it, to explain it away." "Let him try," she said fiercely. "That's his voice. Those are his words. He can't lie his way out of that." The next morning I arrived at the courthouse early. Ji-Eun met me outside and I showed her the recording. She listened with growing amazement. "This is incredible," she said. "This proves everything." "Will the judge admit it?" "She has to. It's directly relevant to his testimony. He opened the door when he claimed he never threatened you." We entered the courtroom. He was already there, looking less confident today. Maybe he suspected something. Or maybe he was just impatient to finish this, to collect his settlement and move on with his life. The judge entered. We rose, then sat. "Does the defense wish to present its additional evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ji-Eun said. "We have an audio recording from during the relationship that directly contradicts the plaintiff's testimony." Park immediately objected. Your Honor, this recording's authenticity cannot be verified. We don't know when it was made, if it's been edited, if it's even the plaintiff's voice. I'm willing to testify that it's his voice, I said. Of course you would, Park sneered. That proves nothing. The judge held up a hand. Let's hear the recording first, then we'll discuss admissibility. Ji-eun set up the playback. The courtroom fell silent, and then, his voice filled the space. The screaming first, loud, angry, cruel, words I won't repeat, insults that made me flinch even now. Then my voice, small and pleading, begging him to calm down, to please stop, that I was sorry, that I didn't mean to upset him. Then more screaming, the sound of something being thrown. I'd forgotten that part, him calling me worthless, stupid, a burden. Then crying, my crying, broken and desperate. Then silence, brief, terrible silence. Then his voice again, but different, calm now, cold, calculated. If you ever tell anyone about this, I will destroy you. I'm a lawyer. I know exactly how to do it. Nobody will believe you. Nobody. You'll be the crazy ex, and I'll be the victim. Do you understand me? My voice, barely a whisper. Yes. Say it louder. Yes, I understand. Good. Now clean yourself up. You look pathetic. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I couldn't look at him. I stared at my hands in my lap, tears streaming down my face, as everyone in that room finally heard what I'd been trying to tell them all along. The judge was the first to speak. Is that your voice, Mr. Kim? He didn't answer immediately. His face had gone pale, his confident demeanor shattered. His lawyers whispered urgently to him. Finally, he said, That's out of context. Is that your voice? The judge repeated. Yes, and you are threatening her in this recording. I was upset. I didn't mean... You told her that nobody would believe her if she spoke about your behavior. And then you filed a lawsuit claiming she defamed you when she did exactly that. Your Honor, if I may... Park tried to intervene. No, the judge said sharply. I've heard enough. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning the plaintiff for filing a frivolous claim and for perjury. I'm also referring this case to the Seoul Bar Association for disciplinary review. She looked at him with undisguised disgust. You used your knowledge of the law to silence a victim of your own conduct. That's unconscionable. Park tried to salvage something. Your Honor, we'd like to request... There's nothing to request. This case is over. We're done here. The gavel came down with finality. Have you ever been called a liar for telling the truth? Have you ever felt that chill down your spine when you realize nobody believes you, even knowing you're right? Have you ever felt so alone, so gaslit, so crazy that you questioned your own memories? If you've been through this, tell me in the comments, because nobody, absolutely nobody, should go through this alone. And if you're reading this now, in the middle of pain, in the middle of wondering if you're crazy, if it's really that bad, if anyone will ever believe you, know this. The truth always finds a way to be heard. Always. Even when it takes time. Even when it hurts. Even when you think you've lost everything. Document everything. Save the messages, the emails, the voicemails. Record conversations if you're in a place where that's legal. Not because you're planning for war, but because you deserve to be believed. Because someday, you might need proof that you're not the crazy one. He left the courthouse without looking back. His shoulders were hunched, his confident stride gone. His lawyers walked quickly, trying to escape the judgment in everyone's eyes. Park tried to speak to me one last time. You realize you won't get any money from this? The case is dismissed. I don't want his money, I said quietly. I never did. I just wanted him to stop lying about me. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. Ji-eun hugged me outside the courthouse. You did it, she said. You stood up to him. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. Not yet. I felt exhausted, empty, wrung out, like I'd been fighting for so long that I'd forgotten what peace felt like. I went home, walked through the streets of Seoul, the streets I'd walked with him, the streets where I'd felt so small, so trapped, and they looked different somehow. Still the same buildings, the same subway stations, the same convenience stores, but lighter, like a weight had been lifted from the entire city. In the following days, I returned to walking along the banks of the Han River. Autumn was deepening, the leaves turning gold and crimson before falling. The wind was cold, cutting through my jacket, but I welcomed it. It felt real, clean, honest. I'd sit on the wooden benches near Banpo Bridge, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as dusk fell, watching life continue, indifferent to my small drama, and finding comfort in that indifference. Soul was the same, but I wasn't. I was no longer the woman who accepted crumbs of love. I was no longer the woman who apologized for existing. I was no longer the woman who believed she wasn't enough. I was the woman who'd had the courage to tell the truth, even when everyone doubted. The woman who'd fought back. The woman who'd survived. Pain, over time, transformed into courage, and courage, over time, transformed into peace. If this story seems a bit like yours, if you've ever felt that nobody would believe you, if you've ever had to prove your own truth when all you wanted was to be heard, write it down below. Sometimes, sharing pain is the first step to healing. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone is what gives us the strength to keep going. And if you've already fallen but found the strength to get up, comment, "I made it. I want to feel your strength." I want to know that you're also here, on the other side, breathing, living, resisting, because every survivor is a reminder that we can make it through, that we're stronger than what tried to break us. 3 months after the trial, something unexpected happened. I received a message on my phone from an unknown number. My heart raced. Was it him? Was he still trying to harass me? But when I opened it, I saw a photo, a picture of him at a bar, arm around another woman, both smiling. And beneath it, a message. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up. He did the same thing to me. I saw the news about your case, and it gave me the strength to leave him. And now I'm going to file my own complaint. You saved me. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time. My hands started shaking, but not from fear, from recognition, from the terrible confirmation that I wasn't his only victim, that everything I'd suspected was true. He was a pattern, a predator, someone who'd done this before and would have done it again, but also from hope, because she'd gotten out, because my story had helped her, because speaking the truth, as painful as it was, had mattered. I typed back, "You're not alone, and you're going to win. I'm here if you need anything." She responded immediately, "Can we meet?" We met at a cafe in Itaewon, neutral territory. She was younger than me, maybe mid-20s, with the same look I'd had, tired eyes, cautious demeanor, like she was bracing for attack at any moment. Her name was Yuna. She told me her story, and it was eerily similar to mine. The initial charm, the gradual isolation, the criticism disguised as care, the explosions followed by silence, the threats, the gaslighting. He'd even used some of the same phrases. "You're too sensitive. Nobody will believe you. You're lucky I put up with you." "I thought I was crazy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought it was all in my head." "It wasn't," I assured her. "It was real, and it was wrong, and it wasn't your fault." We talked for 3 hours. I gave her Ji-Yoon's contact information, told her about resources for survivors, shared what I'd learned about documenting abuse and protecting herself legally. When we finally left the cafe, she hugged me tight. Thank you for not staying silent." Over the next few months, I heard from 2 more women he'd dated before me, after me, all with similar stories, all feeling validated and less alone because of what had happened in that courtroom. We formed a small support group, meeting occasionally, checking in on each other, sharing resources and hope. It didn't erase what he'd done to us, but it helped. It reminded us that we weren't crazy, weren't weak, weren't any of the things he'd told us we were. I went back to work fully. My focus returned. My boss noticed the change, mentioned that my recent work had been excellent. I smiled genuinely for the first time in what felt like forever. I started saying yes to social invitations again, went out with Minji and Jihyo, met their other friends, slowly expanded my circle, tried new restaurants, watched movies, went to concerts, rediscovered what it felt like to enjoy life without fear. I even started dating again, cautiously, with clear boundaries and zero tolerance for red flags. The first man who raised his voice at me, over something minor, barely even an argument, I ended it immediately. "I don't accept that behavior," I said calmly. "We're done." He was shocked, apologized profusely, said it would never happen again, but I didn't care. I'd learned my lesson. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, and protect yourself first. There were difficult days still. Therapy continued. I had to work through layers of trauma, patterns of thinking that still told me I was too much or not enough, but I was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but healing. 1 year after the trial, I got a letter from the Seoul Bar Association. They'd concluded their investigation into his conduct. He'd been suspended from practicing law for 2 years, required to complete ethics training, and placed on probation. If there were any further complaints, his license would be permanently revoked. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. It meant his threats had finally caught up with him, that the system he'd manipulated had held him accountable, at least partially. I framed that letter and hung it on my wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that speaking up matters, that truth matters, that fighting back matters. Little did I know that that humiliation in the courtroom would be the beginning of my strength, but it was. It was exactly that. The day he tried to destroy me publicly was the day I discovered what I was truly made of. I discovered I was made of steel, wrapped in softness, of scars that had become armor, of pain that had transformed into purpose. I started volunteering at a domestic violence resource center, helping other survivors navigate the legal system. I couldn't offer legal advice, but I could offer something else. The assurance that they weren't alone, that they weren't crazy, that they deserved to be believed. I wrote about my experience anonymously online, and the response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments from people who'd lived similar nightmares, who felt seen and validated by my words. Thank you for sharing this. I thought it was just me. You gave me the courage to leave. Each message was a reminder that my pain hadn't been meaningless, that it could be transformed into something that helped others. Today, my apartment is still the same small space near Hongdae Station. The windows still shake when the subway passes beneath, but now, I love that sound. It reminds me that life continues, that the city keeps moving forward, and that I'm moving forward too. I can look at myself in the mirror now without flinching, can acknowledge both my strengths and my weaknesses without shame, can say, I was in an emotionally intense situation without feeling like I need to justify or explain or prove anything. I know my worth now, not because someone gave it to me, but because I claimed it for myself. Sometimes I still think about him, wonder if he's changed, if he understands what he did, if he's capable of real remorse. But mostly, I feel nothing. He's just a person I used to know, a chapter in my story that's closed. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's becoming so whole, so healed, so at peace, that they become irrelevant to your happiness. Today I know that losing someone can be the first step to finding yourself. That pain is temporary, but the strength you gain from surviving it is permanent. That the truth, even when it takes time to be heard, is always worth telling. He made me doubt myself, made me believe I wasn't enough, that I was too much, that I was fundamentally unlovable. But it was precisely that pain that taught me to truly love myself, to respect myself, to choose myself. And today, looking back, I can say with absolute certainty, I didn't need him. I never needed him. I only needed to remember who I was before he convinced me I was someone else. I needed to remember that I was the girl who moved to Seoul alone, who built a career from nothing, who survived loneliness and uncertainty and doubt. I was always strong. I just forgot for a while. And if you're reading this from the middle of that forgetting, from the middle of someone telling you that you're not enough, let me remind you, you are. You absolutely are. You're enough exactly as you are, without changing a single thing to please someone else. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you remember something you lived through, or someone you know who's going through it now, leave a heart in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because we never know who's drowning in silence, who's being told they're crazy, who needs permission to believe their own truth. And remember, you are enough, exactly the way you are. You don't need anyone's approval to feel complete. You don't need to make yourself smaller to fit into someone's life. You don't need to doubt your reality because someone else is rewriting it. You just need to choose yourself, every single day, until it becomes natural, until it becomes automatic, until you can't remember what it felt like to live any other way. The truth always wins, not immediately, not easily, sometimes not for a long time, but it wins, because lies take energy to maintain, require constant vigilance, demand perfect performance. But the truth just is, solid, unchanging, patient, and you will win too. Maybe not in a courtroom, maybe not with public vindication, maybe just in the quiet moment when you realize you're finally free, finally breathing, finally yourself again. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not punishment, not even acknowledgement, just peace, just wholeness, just the simple, profound joy of being alive and being you. In Korea, I learned that even silence can scream, that words don't need to be spoken to be felt, that truth finds a way, even through the thickest walls of lies. I learned that love should never make you feel small, that respect isn't negotiable, that being truly loved means being safe, being seen, being valued, exactly as you are. I learned that the greatest proof of love isn't staying through the pain. It's having the courage to leave when staying means losing yourself. And I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, that I can survive things I thought would destroy me, that I can speak truth even when my voice shakes, that I can stand up even when my legs want to give out. If you're in the middle of your own battle right now, if you're facing your own courtroom or your own moment of truth, know this: you can do it. You're stronger than you think. And on the other side of this pain is a version of you that you're going to be proud to know. I'm proud of who I've become, not despite what happened, but because of how I chose to respond to it. I chose truth over silence, courage over comfort, myself over his approval, and that choice changed everything.